Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I'm going to have a really interesting discussion with immigration attorney Ron Matten. And Ron is, really, he's a great immigration attorney, has a lot of years of experience, especially, working with big companies and employment-based. But he also understands legal tech a lot. And right now, California Bar is reviewing decision to open up, the practice of law, which affects us as immigration attorneys with technology. So I thought it'd be a great time to talk with him about what his thoughts are about these changes if the legal field does open up. As California, as California goes, so will the nation. It will be probably a leader in this kind of stuff, and people will copy it. But Ron, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. As you know, I have a lot of interest in technology and the law, but I've seen a lot of comments about this proposed rule, and I think that there's probably more to it than what a lot of the conversation is talking about right now.
Sure. So the proposed rule, in essence, is saying they want to allow partnership with technology companies to streamline immigration. I think it's general law. To make it more open to people. What quick thing just popped up? I know the immigration community has been very vocal about it. Have you been hearing stuff from other fields?
Yeah, well, that's a great point. I mean, to start out with, this is not specifically aimed at immigration lawyers or immigration law. It's impacting all of the bar, and I think it's a little bit disappointing that, or shows that we sort of operate in these silos. Yeah. Where very few of us are exposed to the conversation that's happening in other areas. I know that there are other areas because this particular proposal, I think, had either the most or the second most comments ever of a proposed rule from the state bar. And so it's not just immigration attorneys that are interested in it, but I think the fact that it is, I think it is important to talk about why it's broad. So it's not about immigration. This is about the state bar really acknowledging the fact that technology is taking a bigger part in all of our lives, and I think it's showing a lot of responsibility by the state bar to try to stay ahead of it. Frankly, they're not ahead of it, but at least keep up with it.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you're a bankruptcy attorney, that seems like a ripe for disruption in that area. Immigration, I can't say immigration is different. There's always a human element to all this, which, in my opinion, which keeps our job alive. But there's just a lot to unpack here. So what do you want to start with?
I think first of all, one of the things, and I'm no expert in this proposal at all, but one of the things that I find interesting is that if you read the mission statement, there's a task force of 23 members. The majority of the members are actually non-attorneys, which seems strange when you first think about it. This is coming from the state bar, but the mission statement is to look after the interests of the public. And if you can kind of like set aside your own, hesitation about how this might impact your profession and your job in your law office, I would ask, think about in your own life, what is it that we want? We all want cheaper, faster, better. When you order something on Amazon, you want it at the lowest price. You want it delivered sometimes same day on Amazon. And why is that? I mean, of course, we enjoy going to the store, but the idea is that there's a new model that's taken effect, not because some regulatory body decided that, but because consumers said they wanted that. And I think if you think about what this task force is trying to do, they're trying to think about legal services in the same way. What do legal services consumers actually want? And maybe we might disagree with their conclusions, but that's their aim.
Yeah, it does open up a lot of problems. In one sense, there's going to be some sort of partnerships eventually between lawyers and non-lawyers, which is going to break a wall that's been there from the beginning. And that's going to completely change the legal industry. One primarily reason is because most lawyers are not business people. And so that's a shift. And also the marketing responsibilities will change. Will there still be restrictions on how attorneys can talk about themselves, but other people can talk more openly? That's an unfair advantage that they'll gain. But, attorneys could push back on that as well. But the reality is, and I'm no expert either on what this proposed rule is, I have some troubles with it too, but the costs are really high for attorneys. Let's just stick with immigration. This is a lot of money. Let's just take a basic marriage adjustment case. That's $1,760 in government fees alone they have to pay. Do a medical, get passport photos. They charge like $20 for 2 passport photos at CVS or one of these kind of stores. Kind of crazy. So any way you can help these people, it's good. But just the problem is the nuances of law are complicated. I had a lady call me today where she filed for adjustment of status on her own, and she had gotten an arrest before, but her attorney had said, "Oh, we had to expunge, it disappeared." And during the interview, she is adamant that she doesn't have arrests and stuff, and they denied her case for misrepresentation. And so she filed on her own. Now, because some lawyer that was an immigration attorney told her that, now realizing in immigration, your criminal history always stays with you. You can't disappear. So it just, maybe if she had some advice, someone that was more affordable could help her, she could have brushed it off and not got that misrep right there. So some sort of help is there. And it's so scary when people do see us. And, part of our role as attorneys, I'm sorry, I'm hijacking the speech, just popped in my head. Even look, because we're having a conversation by video right now, seeing myself, my suit and stuff like that. We're designed to look expensive, and it scares people, but it's somewhat related to justifying the fees as well. Say, oh, this guy's in a suit, look how fancy he is. And so there's going to be a business model shift that happens. And this is what I foresaw a long time ago. And I realized, they're going to use this technology inevitably, and it's going to take out large segments of it. I got to think like, what we were talking about the blacksmiths, and eventually they shifted to other stuff. But there's a few excellent top-notch blacksmiths that charge very high dollar sums. Or let's look at furniture, for example. IKEA is wiping out a lot of furniture makers, but there's still these top-notch, high-end Italian furniture makers that charge a lot of money that are still there. And that's why my business model has always been towards the high end of the market, to shift it, as well as creating a brand for myself that could, go past this stuff because the brand is there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, wow, there's a lot to respond to in that. I think what you touched on at the very end is really the key to this. And I think we have to have the confidence in our skills as a lawyer. And if you have that skill, you should not be afraid of these proposed changes. You shouldn't be afraid of technology, because fundamentally, what technology does is it allows the user of that technology to get connected with somebody who can focus on using their skill, their craft.
Yeah.
And so instead of you being the one filling out a form, for example, I mean, there's lots of immigration software. That's probably the example that most people probably think of. If you go back 20 years ago, you had a person, legal assistant on a typewriter typing out a form I-130. Of course, it was only probably 1 or 2 pages back then. But when you think about it, the value of that client coming to you isn't your ability to fill out that form. It's your advice. It's your strategy, your ability to develop a strategy. It's your experience in knowing what works and what doesn't. And I think one way, or there's a couple of different things that I wanted to bring up. One is that I don't know if the stat is exactly correct, but if you read the materials from the State Bar, they say that 76% of legal consumers are not being served by a lawyer right now. They're basically doing things on their own. Now, that's across all different types of laws, so maybe immigration is a little bit higher, a little bit lower, I'm not sure, but that's a lot. And so whenever I hear any lawyer say, "Oh my God, this is going to put us out of business," the reality is we're only capturing 20 to 30% of the business right now. There's still 70% out there. And so then the question that we should all be asking ourselves is, how can we use technology to make sure that that woman that you spoke with this morning finds you the first time around, right? You don't want her to go to, it doesn't have to be a notario that's bad. Like you said, there are lawyers that don't give particularly good advice. And so when there's all kinds of legal software that leverages this CRM, consumer, whatever it's called, relation management, customer relation management software. And the idea would be, for you, John, is how do you reach 10, 20, 100 times the number of people you're reaching today, so that maybe they don't all select you, but that technology could allow them to say, hey, this is the lawyer that I want to hire. And maybe they're not going to pay you the same amount, but they're paying you for your advice, not for your form filling.
And if the technology does get better and it makes my time more efficient, maybe I could charge a higher hourly rate for the less amount of time, but I'll get to the bottom of the matter much faster. And maybe if people use this technology, they'll more quickly realize there's a problem and they need a person. The software all of a sudden stalls, for example. It says, okay, I need a person. It seems serious.
I mean, imagine there could be, this is not even could, it's already there. It's just not really well distributed, but software that can do an intake for you and assess a person's case and let the person know. You could potentially have, a lawyer could create software that says, hey, don't go to a notario. They're going to take your money and get you put in removal proceedings. Whereas now, what am I trying to say? That might be a lot easier for somebody to access, for example, on their Facebook page, and they'll take the 30 seconds to fill out the little questionnaire, versus they happen to walk by the neighborhood notario, walk in there, next thing you know, they filled out an asylum application that's completely fraudulent. So maybe
I've seen that.
Right? So maybe maybe I'm seeing the silver lining a little too much, but the technology could even help identify those bad cases and keep people away from the bad actors that are out there.
No, my viewpoint is I don't have an opinion whether it's good or bad. I don't know enough about it, and I'm not really as active against it. There's inclination as an attorney saying, oh, this is bad for me as well. But I just realized this wave is coming, and these tech people got all God's money. And so they'll force it. If they see these lawyers are making millions and billions over time, let's get a piece of that. So I'm like, how could I ride the wave knowing the inevitable? And so that's just practical. I just look for practical kind of stuff. I know this is coming. And then how can we use technology? The number one thing is kind of like doctors, do no harm. How can we always come at it like this? Like, how can I help a client in the best way possible, not thinking about my financial incentives in it? Yeah. That's always the mindset to go into it. And potentially this could help some people, access some sort of legal guidance, because just most people have terrible, we get these calls all the time. The things people say is crazy. They think, oh, I've been here, I entered illegally, I did a crime, but I've been paying taxes for 10 years. I've heard if you pay your taxes 10 years is okay. If there's some software I can talk some sense into them, then so be it. If it's in different languages, that talks some sense. There'll be problems and all that, and hopefully work out the kinks. Again, I'm not necessarily that big a supporter, but I understand what you're saying. It's like, this is inevitable. Let's work with it rather than against it. Maybe it is not. Maybe we could push back far, and I don't know. But go ahead.
I think the last point you made is really spot on, which is that I'm not here to convince anyone of supporting it or not being against it, but I would say to someone who's really dead set against it, I think the closest example I can come to it would be taxi drivers against Uber. And we that's happening now. It's still happening, but we kind of know where that's going to end. We know where that's ending up. And I would rather see some of the people that I see very outspoken against it, I would rather see them be part of the conversation and say, well, here are the ethical concerns I have around unauthorized practice of law. I'm not an expert on technology, but how can we build this in to make sure that those interests are protected by the technology? But I think just saying don't let this happen, I think it's the wrong use of energy.
It's an interesting example we did, because I've always, before Uber and Lyft, these kind of services came along, I was always frustrated. Taxis, I'd call them and take forever. They wouldn't show up. There was no market system where I could complain or like they'd be rude or do all sorts of tactics to make the charge go up. And so I was really happy when that stopped, because I was very frustrated with that. And I don't hire legal help as much, but people who come to me, that's a large chunk of their annual income that just comes into my pocket. So for me, it's very important to do the best customer service and do a very clean job. But I sense their frustration. So although it's made a good livelihood for myself, I can't make a livelihood based on closing the doors to people or taking, a chunk out of their lives. So, I appreciate anything that could help with that. There's going to be issues coming into it, for sure. But I just go back to, you could sustain yourself by having a good brand that could keep you going through this. But I mean, how are you, what kind of model does your law firm have right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and in full disclosure, I worked for almost 15 years with the big four accounting firms, who are, one of the examples that I think people are kind of calling out as actors that could take a lot of clients away from people.
Yeah.
And I just started my own firm about a year ago, and really the focus that I have, I think it can be used as an example of where there's still a ton of market that's out there. So I've really been focused on trying to either develop technology myself or finding partners out there that are technology experts that can really help me connect with what the user wants, so the client. I think a lot of the technology, we all go to the AILA conferences and we know who goes to them. That technology that's there, it's primarily based on helping law firms. And I think what you just said is really the key. Nobody liked having to either wait outside in the corner. I mean, in LA, that would never happen, but in New York, you wait on the corner. In LA, you might call, and who knows when the cab's going to arrive. Whereas now you plug it in your app, it tells you how many minutes away they are. You can even see where the car is. You don't have to worry about carrying cash around because the exact amount gets charged. And that didn't happen because Uber wanted to make money. That happened because there was a need for that. That was what consumers wanted. And so that's really been the focus of the law firm that I'm building, is what do clients want? I mean, I know some of it from having worked for many years, but trying to come up with technologies, solutions that are about delivering what clients want. And I think, having worked at those big accounting firms, they're not going to, well, I shouldn't say this quite so certainly, but they're not set up to provide a consumer service the way you or I can as an individual, where we can have someone come into the office, we can spend as much time as we want. They tend to be consolidated into big groups, and I'm a bit off topic, but I guess the point is that I think there's still a lot of space out there for smaller law firms, but we're going to have to find creative ways to either buy the technology or partner up with other either lawyers or technology companies to help ourselves.
Well, let's go into a little bit of history if possible. So you worked in Canada for the big four accounting firms, and because they, a part of their plan is to get more involved in the legal sphere. They can't directly do that within the United States. So in England, they're doing kind of stuff, partner with Ball, I can't remember what the initials Ball are for. And also in Canada, they're trying to do this kind of stuff, having lawyers and doing primarily, I guess, H-1B employment-based stuff that goes along with the corporate accounts.
Yeah, and I mean, there are people who see this video who might disagree with what I'm going to say, but they're much better designed to deal with the really big corporate accounts. But think about when I think about my client base, which are lots of smaller companies and individuals. They're not going to want to go to one of those big organizations. They want more of the personal touch. They want to feel like they're receiving the service that they're paying for. I think there's always going to be a little bit of suspicion that they would be overpaying if they went to one of those really big firms. So I have to go on just sort of instinct that they're not going to just take all the market share from everyone.
Yeah. There's a segmentation in the market, and that's something I would really focus on. Is just, my parents had a restaurant, and when they opened it up, they had, beforehand, my stepdad's Italian, he's a chef, so he had like more expensive Italian restaurants. But then one of the last restaurants, second to last, opened up. They say, you know what, we're going to open this up to the middle of the market so everyone could eat this Italian food that usually charges 3 times the price, but for a middle of the market. And that restaurant didn't do too well. And one thing I saw is when you're in that middle of the market, there's so much competition that you get eaten up. So you never want to be like that. You either want to be at the high end or the very low end, the McDonald's or the Spago. The middle is just too much competition. You see these retail restaurants constantly turning around and closing. So the next one we did, we like, okay, we're going to cut down expenses and make a self-service restaurant, a salad bar, which had high ingredients, but it really had no employees other than some guy in the back chopping. And that restaurant did well, but at that point they wanted to retire, and I started my law practice, so we sold that and it went away. But the same thing happens in the legal sphere. There are people who will want the services of a brand name that's like me, that puts stuff out there the way I do, like my podcast, my videos. There are people that will call in lawyers that they hear on the radio. And I did radio ads for a brief period of time, and I realized I don't want to do radio ads because the kind of clientele that would hire a lawyer from a radio ad are not the kind of clients I want to have. They're not necessarily the best type of clients, and I don't want to go too much detail because it'd be pejorative, but I'm like, if you're going to see a lawyer and pick him based on being a bus ad or on the radio when it's impersonal and you can't look more, then that's not the kind of person. That person on the radio is trying to do mass advertising, get everyone they can, or on the bus, they don't distinguish between people. They just want the money to eat it up. And, you know, there's room for that, for people to go to that. But if you have your own brand, regardless of what goes up and down, you could still do it. It's just really about quality, keeping the quality up. These clothing manufacturers still do, you know, Gucci and the stuff my wife wears. They're still making money, even though, you know, there's Forever 21 and these kind of stores too. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah. Wow. We could talk about this topic. This should be like a 10-part podcast, I think.
Yeah.
You know, I love the way you keep bringing up branding. I think that is so key. Anybody who's watching this, who's got their own firm, one of the most important pieces of advice that I got when I was starting up the firm from a guy who, maybe I'll just call his name out, Joe Grasmick, based in Buffalo, New York. Woohoo! He was like
an immigration attorney.
He's an immigration attorney. He's been around. He's the guy who wrote the NAFTA book. You should do a podcast with him.
Yeah, I'll go over his name and call him.
But he said, Ron, you've got to be known for being good at something in particular. Don't try to be, you know, jack of all trades, because then there's 15,000 AILA attorneys or whatever the number is these days. How do they find me? How do they find you? It's not because, you know, I paid extra money to have my name listed on the top of Google, which I haven't, but it's because, you know, almost all of my clients are coming through referrals or repeat customers because people know what I'm capable of doing. They know the types of cases I work on. Maybe they like the technology angle that I talk about a lot. So I think the brand that I create for myself, your brand, that's one of the most valuable things that you can do that, you know, automation and a robot can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, this should be a first-year course in law school, marketing and branding. My reading nowadays is at nighttime, primarily on this kind of stuff, because it makes all the difference. I mean, you can be a great attorney, but you don't brand yourself right, no one's going to come in. Or you could be a great attorney and just take one or two cases, but because your branding is good, have high dollar volume and do really great service and spend the rest of your time. And like I do, I teach, have a podcast, I'm at Pepperdine, I have my training courses now, my coaching courses, all this kind of stuff. And you develop, you know, higher level skills, just new ways of going at this essential commodity we have, which is this skill and education, different ways of putting it in the market and to make a living off it. So it's very interesting stuff.
There was something else you said that I wanted to, that I'm really excited to comment on too. I mean, like I said, we could talk all day, but when you talked about quality,
Mm-hmm.
If you know, and I don't know how much this comes up in your practice, but anybody who's doing high volume practice, especially business immigration. I mean, I was on a team where we did, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of the same thing. There was so much human labor of attorney time, which is very expensive time, dedicated to reviewing forms, reviewing the I-129, reviewing the ETA 989 over and over again, or in the perm context, reviewing newspaper ads. You know, did you copy and paste everything perfectly? And I mean, this is a little bit outside the scope of what the specific rule that's being proposed is about, but it's the more general topic about automation, which is that automation is not just about making our jobs more efficient, but it's about making sure that we're not wasting time doing quality control for clerical errors. Because if you have the automation set up right, you know that you're gonna the right information will end up on the form, and so you shouldn't have to waste time reviewing certain things. And again, going back to the earlier part of the conversation, freeing up your time to provide the more high value service you can offer, which is your advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like when you look at something that's really time consuming, like removal, if there's parts where that could just get, I mean, there's so many people that need removal attorneys, but they can't afford it.
Yeah.
The lawyer can still make the same amount of money if that time could get scrunched down. And, you know, if removal of cities was inefficient anyway itself, the court system was designed. But yeah, anyway, I mean, at the end of the day, it's do no harm and help your clients. If there's a way to make it more palatable for them, easier for them to access the legal sphere, because it's so sad that I get calls every day with people, you know, I have a consultation fee. I only take on a few cases a month. So majority, almost 99% of the phone calls I get, and I get 10 to 20 calls, and most of them are good leads. I just keep saying no. And today I was saying no to some people, and I was like, damn, I really got to shut down my emotions, because these are heart-wrenching cases and they need good legal guidance. But I don't have the bandwidth to be able to handle that, especially because I'm doing other kind of stuff that's above, different from the legal sphere. And I wish these people had access to some attorney that could do that. I can't do that myself. And the pro bono organizations throughout the city, although their funding has gone up, I was talking to some people, they're limited to what the way they can do it and everything. So at the end of the day, you can't fight progress. Hopefully it is progress, not regress, but we gotta really be on, instead of fighting it, be on the front line of how can we really control it in the way that we want it. We think it's good in the interest of clients.
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, I think, you know, neither one of us wants to suggest that if this leads to a client being taken advantage of by technology or by notario or by whoever it might be, neither one of us is saying that that's a good outcome, right? Like that's very clear. We don't want that to happen. I think I'm just, from my perspective, I think the idea would be if I was a removal defense attorney, I'd be looking at this saying, it's not that the market's going to become completely wild with all these notarios taking my work, but rather, what can I do to use the technology to prevent the bad cases from ever getting filed in the first place? Because maybe, you know, maybe it can be used as a, you know, to use kind of religious metaphors, like used as a weapon instead of a shield, right? Like use the technology to actually, let's use it to take away the power from the notarios if you're in the removal field.
Well, just a question about your practice. What kind of software or hardware have you that you've used that you really enjoy that you share with the listeners?
Wow. You know, I work a lot with. Wow, this is pretty revealing. You know, you're lifting.
And maybe not plug certain brands. Maybe just generally what kind of stuff. Yeah.
The man behind the curtain here. You know, I love the practice management software I use, which is called Practice Panther.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I did when I got away from, sounds like I escaped, which I kind of did, but when I got away from the big firm sort of culture was I was able to see that, wow, there's all this software out there already that's not designed specifically for immigration attorneys, but has so much more power than what I think a lot of the very specific immigration software has. So there's another one that's very widely used called Clio.
Mm-hmm.
But I use it for everything from, you know, CRM to invoicing, finance management, workflow management.
Let me ask you a question. Everyone says you have to get CRM, and I'm a solo, I do everything myself.
Yeah.
It seems like so much work that every 6 months, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do CRM because everyone says do it, it's good. But then I'm like, I don't feel like putting information in. Do you have an assistant help, or do you do it? How does that all work out, the time commitment for using CRM?
I'm going to have to charge you for this conversation. You know, that's a work in progress. For the moment, I'm doing far too much of it myself. But you know, I haven't even, my firm hasn't even been open for a year, so it's coming. You know, but I'll tell you, like some of the other things I look at, and maybe I won't name specific software names, but I look at ways to use contract people or, even there are back office support teams in India. There's back office incoming, what do you call them, like call centers in Mexico that can do bilingual client intake. There's all kinds of programs. I don't use these, but I think Smith AI and Ruby Reception and all of these that if I had sort of the practice where I had just a flow of kind of cold calls from random people, I would probably invest more in that. But right now, 90% of what comes in is a real case. And so it's worth my time to put it in.
Yeah.
But if I was trying to keep track of, hundreds or thousands of leads, I would need some help there. But there's all kinds of cool technology. And the great thing is, if you can allow yourself to get out of the box of saying there's going to be a one size fits all software that does everything, you're going to have so much more power available to you. So for example, even some of these automated like phone call programs, there's a phone system I use called Grasshopper, which is basically a VoIP system. I haven't set it up yet, but they offer a service where basically it would track every incoming call. That information could be put into your database so that then 6 months from now, if I'm wondering if that person ever called back and became a case, I could look it up. And so I don't know. All my answers to your questions are long-winded, but I would say
this is good. It's the reality of it. It's such a hard decision because first, like these CRMs, there's like so many of them. And I'm like, I got to sit just using immigration software. I tried doing that and testing some people out. It was so draining on me that I gave up and went back to filling the forms myself. Yeah. And then CRM's the same. And I got one. And then I was like, every time I go to a networking meeting, I meet 3 lawyers. I have to then input their information, how I met them, and this and that. I'm like, I had a colleague who runs a medium-sized, it's probably the biggest family firm there is, but I mean, relative to the firm, it's not that big. But he has like a voice thing. He's an older gentleman. He talks into a voice recorder and then his assistant does it. So that makes sense. He just says all the talking points he needs and the assistant puts it in. That's a good system. But for someone like me, I'm like, it's more work I don't feel like doing. Plus, my way of doing things, I get all the leads, I get on the phone with them really quick and realize that it's not going anywhere, get off the phone. And I just, I'm cherry picking for the gold, and there'll be silver and stuff in there, but I'll let it go.
What I do see as a huge market area is that lawyers perhaps like me, but there's a lot of us out there who are somewhat tech savvy and like comparing different technologies. We'll just offer consulting service and say, hey, let me come in and look at your practice. Yeah. I'll suggest some systems and software, give you some suggestions on, best ways to staff your firm so that, you're not, the key is the old days of like, okay, the law firm has, the receptionist that's a full-time employee, a legal assistant that's a full-time employee, 1 or 2 paralegals per lawyer, and especially now that you have to pay for health insurance benefits and who knows what else, that's a very costly way to operate. Where in reality, for example, what you're describing, you don't want an employee. You need someone who can just sort of parachute in, collect those business cards from you, and then after, maybe $100 worth of work, the information is just in your system somewhere. Yeah. You don't really care how it's done. Leave that to somebody else. Again, the theme comes back to this idea that you should be focused on what you do best, which is advising your clients.
Yeah. And it's been hard for me because in one sense I was like, oh, that's gonna be a cost here, cost there. But as I make more money, I'm thinking like if I just, we just moved and there's always boxes in the backyard and I was like cutting them, making it smaller, and there were just so many wouldn't fit in the trash. So every week you have to fill the trash and then wait. And then my wife's like, let's just call somebody. Some guy came for $100, cut it all up, put it in a box, put it in his truck and left. I was like, I spent like hours on this, and I'm a lawyer. Like my hourly fee is so it could have been $100. It's like it's not smart for me to do that. It's just if I could pay someone to teach me and coach me. I'm doing coaching for people doing branding and immigration law, and I'm like, these people are so smart that are hiring me because like 5 or 10 years ago, I would have been like, no. One is I can't trust the person they're real, and secondly, like, is it worth the money and stuff? But it's like, who cares if you get like one tip of information that could be. If in our practice, because we charge a lot of money, it could be a game changer. So if you can hire someone to just coach you and 1 minute of their 5-hour conversation is worth it, that could save you tens of thousands of dollars or make you tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, uh, I think on this, you and I are going to give away all the secrets here.
That's what this podcast is about. Yeah, help people out.
But as you're growing your practice and you have time, then yeah, don't waste your money hiring somebody. But once you get to the point where and it doesn't take very long, that suddenly you're just too busy.
Yeah.
It's not smart. For example, there's a lot of things that I'm doing. I'm in the process of trying to figure out how to offload them either to somebody I'm going to
Yeah.
hire or to some outside vendor, because it does not make sense for you to be cutting boxes, for you to be entering data into your CRM. If it takes you half an hour to enter that, and during that half hour you could have gotten a new $2,000 client,
Yeah.
you may as well just paid somebody $2,000 to sit
Yeah.
there for 39 hours of the week,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to release so much stress, because this is like putting in information in a CRM is like a burden. You're like, oh, I have to do this. There's certain things, like I used to enjoy inputting the forms, like I-130, I-45. But recently it's just, there's so much more fun stuff I could do that's more higher value, where I'm like, oh, I can't. So I actually invested in testing out a new software. I'm not going to mention it. But so far the software, maybe if I get better at it, it's taking the same amount of time as it would if I filled the forms myself. It's just the only thing is the way you could type on the software is so much smoother than typing in I-130 in the USCIS forms. Although the time so far is the same, I just have a better user experience, so it leaves me less frustrated when I'm done. But I got to get more efficient at it. Or the proper way to use the software is have the client get the questionnaires, fill it out, and it inputs. What I'm doing right now is they give me my own questionnaires, and I input from my questionnaires to there. If I cut out that step, then all of a sudden it's save like hours right there.
Right. But coming back to something that I was talking about earlier, that's absolutely true, and that's important for you and your practice. But you got to make sure that whatever it is you give your client that's going to replace your current system, it better be an improvement for them.
Yeah.
It can't just be an improvement for you.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think a lot of law firms fall into the trap of is, oh my gosh, like there's all these fees, and it takes a lot longer to prepare an H-1B than it ever did before, and all this stuff. Or an I-45 is like 537 pages now. It used to be 2. But it's like you can't then implement technology solely to help yourself and forget about the fact that you got to make sure that your client's experience doesn't suffer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I do like the way I did my questionnaire. And then when I'm inputting it, it's an extra level of review of what's going on before it goes into the software. Because clients, when they fill out questionnaires, they just really do a half-assed job a lot of time. And it's a lot of information. They don't understand how important all of it is. And they think like, oh, 5 years or, however many years of history, it's not a big deal if I don't remember this or that. Like, we got to say all this stuff in there, really push them on it.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all model. I mean, you've got to think about what type of cases you're working on, who are your clients, software that if you're filing, if you're filing one cancellation of removal case a month, who cares if it takes you an hour to fill out the form, right? Like having software that automatically fills out the form, that's not really where your time is being spent. It's meeting with the client, working with them to get the declarations from their neighbors and friends, and getting the police certificates and the FBI check, all of that stuff. And I'm talking about something I don't really know that much about, but the point is like I'll go to AILA conferences and hear newer attorneys, or I'm on a number of different attorney chat groups, and newer attorneys are often, I see them, there's like this copycat mode, without really realizing whether they need something. And a lot of them are smart enough to say like, my practice is such and such, do I really need that? Mm-hmm. But, you really got to take a moment to think about what's going to help your consumer.
Yeah, it's kind of like lawyers who, once they open their own office, they get like the penthouse office with the view of the ocean, and they're just paying like $10,000 to rent. Like, you got to make the money first, then buy the rent. Go ahead.
This is my office just for our phone conversation. My actual office does not have a view.
So, Ron, just a little more about how people could learn more about the stuff you're doing. I mean, you go to conferences, you speak a lot, you're really active in this tech space. Tell us why are you so interested in that, and more about how your firm operates in this field, in our field, and everything like that.
You know, I mean, it's really cliche, but I would say do something you're passionate about. And it was almost in a way accidental. I mean, when I started the firm, you know, started off on my own a year ago after 20 years in practice, which is kind of, a lot of people start their own firm right out of law school. I thought that I was really going to be using my expertise as like an expert perm filer. And you know, I actually tried to count them the other day. It actually had to do with an RFE response where I was saying that the H-1B argument about level 1 wages is all a bunch of BS. And I was gonna use myself as an expert on how wrong the USCIS is. But I digress. I guess the point is like in the process of setting up the firm, I had to create systems, and I had to, and I started to discover this technology that's out there, and I just became super passionate about it. And it was as though, although I had been always working in technology and reporting and process improvement as a lawyer at these bigger firms, it's really now that I see the need that's out there. I mean, again, I'm gonna mention this statistic again because there was really, I would say, a turning point in the growth of my firm. It happened back in May. I got invited to this AILA immigration technology conference back in Washington. And it was something so obvious that I just hadn't really thought about, which is that you've got this really small portion of the population that can afford a nice fancy lawyer. And then you've got this portion of the population that's so poor that they can get legal aid. But then you've got this huge part of the population in the middle that is too rich for legal aid, but not rich enough to hire a lawyer. I mean, we've all had these clients that once you tell them their fee, especially for marriage-based cases, like, oh, I'll just do it myself, right? But it happens in the business context too. And that was really this moment where it's like, I don't need to be secretive about what I'm doing. I mean, I've joked a couple times on this conversation, but there's the market that's out there that's untapped right now is enormous. It's enormous. And, you know, I think that's the part that, you know, unless you're just going to be really complacent and expect to be doing the same thing you've been doing for the next 20 years, then yeah, you're going to go out of business. But if you're, you know, if you have any sort of spirit of trying to do things better, and really, you know, we became lawyers because we wanted to serve clients. And so just remind yourself of that. And the way you're going to serve your clients, coming back again to this theme of technology, is we have to adopt technology, whether we like it or not. If you're not good at it, don't worry, because there's going to be people like me who will be there to help you. There's going to be lots of opportunity that if you're a good lawyer, you'll still have work to do.
You know, we're talking about giving away secrets. So I want to ask if you know about this. I think a real game changer in this sphere is a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. Have you read that book?
No.
I would say just go order right now on Amazon, read it. Blue Ocean Strategy. It's a real game changer to your perspective of how to, because you're talking about this untapped market. And the idea behind the book is, you know, as immigration lawyers, we're like in this red ocean, this bloody ocean. We're all fighting for these fish that are there. But there's a huge ocean that's blue and ready to go that's untapped. Yeah. And it's like, well, how do you tap that? So that instead of fighting over pieces over here, there's big fish over there that are just swimming around ready to be eaten. So, and so that's why part of what I think is like, how could I look at what I have as a service or product? How could I view it differently? How could I provide it differently, maybe to a different market segment, a whole different area? Part of it is, you know, coaching and training. You know, the information that I have, I typically, immigration lawyers, we sell it to our clients. But well, there's other lawyers that are coming here. They don't know how to be an immigration lawyer. They don't know the nuances, or they don't know how to do branding and marketing and the business side of it. I have this information. Why just sell it to clients? Why not offer that service to colleagues as well? And I don't view it as them in competition with me, because again, the market is so big and untapped. If they come in, they're newer, they're probably going to charge lower prices to start, and that middle of the road people aren't going to pay my fees. We'll go with them until they build themselves up.
How many of us immigration lawyers have said immigrants are not stealing jobs from Americans?
Yeah.
And it's the exact same concept. It's that there's not a finite pool of jobs. There's also not a finite pool of legal cases. It's really, in both cases, there's just opportunity that's not being taken advantage of right now. And so, again, I don't want to suggest that I'm trying to keep us on track here, John.
Yeah.
I don't want to suggest that the proposals by the State Bar are perfect. And there are lots of people who know more about them than me. But I think, again, the point is, if you can put aside the fear, then be constructive, because I think that the concerns around notarios, the concerns around big accounting firms, for example, coming in and taking all the work from law firms, it's not that they're not real concerns, but I just think the more constructive approach is gear your comments to the State Bar in a way that you're helping them shape the rules that maintain the integrity of the legal profession, but also look after the interests of the public.
I mean, let's talk about the legal profession. This goes to philosophical stuff, which I haven't really thought of, so our conversation is going to be very light. But how much does it make sense to have this monopoly that they give us as attorneys? Should it even exist in the first place?
Wow.
I think we have to sit and think about that.
I'm drinking a cup of water here. I think I'm stronger to answer that question. That is a great question, and
I mean, the idea is protecting people. Like in England, I think it's still like this. Like if you're a lawyer, you can't even have a sign outside your door that says you're a lawyer. They're that strict about advertising.
Right.
But luckily, I think there was some guy in Arizona, this lawyer that was always fighting and stuff. He sued the bars so much that they pushed him into allowing us to advertise. And that's a game changer for me. I couldn't get the ball rolling on my firm on my own, referrals, all this kind of stuff. It was the internet and internet marketing that permitted me to create my firm and be who I am today. And so that's very important. But 50 years ago, they would have said me going to do videos and talking about the law openly in a forum like this, that I would be the devil in a lot of circles in immigration and ethics and all that kind of stuff. But I think this is fine. Even some states, I think Florida's like this. If you're going to do like a video, you have to give it to them to watch first to approve it, and then you can put it. Which is, it's impossible to advertise properly or just talk about law in a sense. I think that's the case. So it's restraints on trade hurt the consumer, and our job is to protect consumers at the end of the day. So I mean, it's a big controversial thing to talk about, and it's a game changer. But should we have restraints on trade like this? Should we even have unions, for example? Like I'm in Hollywood or Los Angeles. The cost of shooting a movie goes really high. But the idea is that the unions are protecting the people, the employees there. But again, is that protecting or hurting them? Is it taking away jobs from larger community? Because a lot of the union people have these jobs that are cushy, and then there's other people who have a hard time getting in. And law is a sense like that. We have to spend this much on law school, give this test. Does this test actually test our abilities as lawyers, or just our memorization skills? So, yeah.
I need to prepare for this conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, off the top of my head, the interesting thing is that you said something earlier that I didn't respond to, which is, I forget exactly how you put it, but basically, there's this sentiment, and I don't have stats on it, but that the general public is intimidated by lawyers, right? They might see you in the suit and be intimidated by you. And so maybe that's another reason why they don't go to a lawyer and they go to an alternate legal provider. And so it all speaks to the fact that maybe the profession, I mean, maybe this is sort of the oversimplified answer, but maybe the profession hasn't been doing a good job of keeping up with changes in society, and that all of those rules that were, being a lawyer was a very lofty profession, and we didn't want to grade our profession by advertising, that's beneath us, and makes us look cheap and like we're, selling ourselves to the highest bidder or something. But maybe there's an aspect of it that just doesn't work anymore. And for the types of services that consumers need from lawyers, the needs have changed. And so we're not living in these little quaint little towns that, the lawyer, there's one lawyer and one doctor in the town and everybody knows who they are, and they go to them for their will, for their, mortgage, or, whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's a more complicated world out there. And so you're right. Like the advertising rules, I mean, I went to law school long before you did. Hopefully not that long, but I remember that was how they taught professional responsibility and ethics, was that, the legal profession is different. There are these rules in place to make sure that we behave in a certain way that's just viewed differently by society. But in reality, even doctors have adapted. I mean, they sort of have had to, because of changes in the way healthcare, insurance and delivery has taken place. But like, I don't know what the last time was you tried to go see the doctor, but now, at least with my doctor, they really encourage you not to go there in person. They want to be able to use technology to do the diagnosis of a lot of the basic things, because same like attorneys, that's not a good use of their time for to spend their whole day with people coughing on them that just have a cold, right? It's also not good if you have the cold to have to like find your way over to the doctor. You'd rather just sit there on the couch watching,
Yeah, it's relaxing. Yeah.
Price is Right or something.
Yeah, it's I forgot what I was about to talk about, but it's a fascinating thing in what direction everything is going with the technology and what we're doing, and the cost of it all.
Hey, John, there was something that I wanted to read.
Sure.
I'm like, this will probably end up getting cut out, but I want to read it anyway.
No, go ahead.
So I want to just read this quote to you. It is imaginable that high-grade tasks that have been conducted by human workers will be robotized. Guess when that was from?
It's hard. I'm either going to say 1880 or 1980.
No. The important thing is, it was not today. It's not anytime recent. That was actually from 1987. That's the year that I started undergrad. I did my undergrad in industrial engineering. And I thought to look something up from back then, because it occurred to me as I was getting prepared for this conversation with you today, that when I was going to undergrad, people were like, oh, what's industrial engineering? And the best way that I could explain it was, industrial engineering is about making things more efficient. And the question was, oh, but you're going to make things so efficient that all these people are going to lose their jobs in these manufacturing plants. And maybe it's my fault, maybe it's not, but I guess the point is that if you think about it, the reason why there's not a lot of high-tech manufacturing in the US anymore isn't because there were industrial engineers that figured out how to automate things. It's because consumers wanted higher quality products that were cheaper and faster. And so that led big corporations in a free market world to either use automation, or frankly, in a lot of cases, they relocated their plants overseas. But the point is, that was 30 years ago, and the whole planet didn't, implode, and we all, the apocalypse didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I think we're sort of at a similar point in the legal profession now, where, let's not be afraid. I mean, that's just going to be my theme.
Couple points, like you mentioned 80s, the big fear when I was growing up was Japan's going to take over and they're so efficient, they're going to dominate. Like, no, that didn't happen. But with regards to efficiency, and there's a presidential candidate who's scaremongering about machines taking over, trucks and all this kind of stuff. The reality is, the more efficient the process gets, the cheaper the product becomes. And the cheaper the product becomes means the less hours I need to work to be able to afford the same standard of living. So right now I need 2 clients to afford whatever lifestyle I have. if everything becomes cheaper, I only need one client.
Right.
So it doesn't make a difference. Like these, you can't look at it as exact fact. These variables change with it, and so these efficiencies will change with it as well. And when you look at the outsourcing that did happen, it did hurt American jobs and NAFTA and all this kind of stuff, but it brought billions literally of people out of poverty. And so if we're talking about how we want to help our homeless people, we want to help the neighbors be good people, be good religious people. It's like, well, we really brought China, Mao, under a communist social system, and he was a really bad guy. He killed millions and millions, tens of millions of people. His policies, centralized planning policies, really hurt people. Once you have the market system and let them do trade with us, they did have a most favored nation status, which is controversial. We give them some benefits to push this kind of stuff, which wasn't fair, I think, for Americans. But at the same time, a lot of Chinese people have a better standard of living now, and they were living really bad. I mean, China was horrible back in the early 80s. And where they've gone now, in Vietnam, in India, and people in India are living terribly, terrible lives. And they're starting to come up. Still a lot of them live in abject poverty. But at the end of the day, if we're looking at people as human beings and we're talking about caring about people, we are doing that. And this technology is helping that. These call centers where you can call anywhere in the world, it's all helping that matter. We just constantly have to be on top of it. And it's one of those things, our parents' generation, they can do the same job for 50 years and that'd be safe. Every morning when I wake up, I say, how could I, tweak my values and my value that a certain service I bring to make it more better? How could I help my marketing? How could I, do things a little bit differently? That's all I think about. How could I do things differently? And it's hard to think like that. And I naturally, I get excited about that kind of stuff. I just like do with technology. Most people aren't like that, but you have, setting up this podcast for me took me years because I couldn't figure out how to upload from the hosting service to iTunes. It was just one button I had to press. It took me 18 months to figure that out. And it was so frustrating. I watched videos and this and that. I couldn't understand it. But I'm like, you know what? This is going to be a game changer if I could do this. And that's the reality. To compete, you have to do everything you can. And that's it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a much broader conversation which goes way, way beyond what you and I are talking about, which is what duty does society as a whole owe to ourselves to figure out what to do with people? And maybe let me restate that in a little bit different way. You mentioned the fact that your parents had the same job for 50 years. I mean, same thing with my parents. And I have actually I have three siblings. They've all had the same job for all their lives. I'm the youngest of four, and I have not followed that path. The question for me is, how do we as a society look after the vast majority of the population, which really probably is not going to be capable of doing what you and I do, which is this kind of constant reinvention of ourselves, right? And so do we just forget about those people? Do we sort of go the total opposite way and become, socialist or communist and like have this huge social welfare net where you just pay people to do nothing? I don't know. Those are much bigger questions than you and I can answer, but I do think that it is a discussion that should be happening, and unfortunately it gets sort of overshadowed by a lot of the fear mongering around technology, because the technology development is going to happen. It just is going to. I was thinking about a good example to give you. So, I actually, we probably both have to go, but all right, let me give you this one example, and then I'll let you have the closing word. You're supposed to be controlling me, not the other way around.
I can keep going. I love these conversations. If you have time, we can still go, but I'm sure you.
Okay, so there was just this one idea that I had as I was thinking about our conversation today, which is, to drive home this point that it's really what the market is demanding that's driving a lot of this change. If you think about driverless cars, right? You hear a lot in the news, and whenever there's an accident, you'll hear about it. There was, I don't know, it was like a year ago that one of the driverless cars, I think, even killed someone, which is terrible. But again, like drawing back to my own history, I took a class in 1990 about self-driving cars, and back then the concept was that there were going to be these like metal strips on the highway that car would literally be like physically connected to. And
the road would be the controlling aspect. Yeah.
And you flash forward to today, and even though, you know, they don't really exist as a fully functioning thing, most people, or I shouldn't say most people, a lot of people already have these cars that have like lane, what do you call it? Like
Assist
lane
stuff,
detection, lane assistance, so that you don't accidentally like drift over out of your lane, or you don't get too close to the person in front of you, or, you know, it helps you parallel park, all that stuff. And I was thinking about, you know, as much as people are like, oh, I really love to drive, I like being in control of the car, the, you know, the American spirit of driving and all of that. If you said to the average person, this car is going to allow you to be on Instagram while you're driving to your, you know, through traffic to get to work, I bet you 9 out of 10 people would say, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And, you
or
know,
it makes traffic more efficient where it cuts half in time because you don't have people changing lanes necessarily. Yeah.
Right. It makes it more efficient. It gives you time for more leisure time. And I think that, again, like that's what this is all about, which is what is the market really asking for? And I'm hoping that there really will be some comments from the general public on this proposed rule, because they're the ones that really should be the ones to decide to some degree. I mean, not to say that they can go crazy, but hopefully they have a lot of input.
Yeah, hopefully the bar does it justice and takes a well look. My faith in the bar has been tested a lot, especially the California bar this year with the mistakes they constantly make with the bar exam, with the fingerprinting issue. It just is, and there's other issues of money. I don't want to go too much into this political kind of stuff. So one thing I can keep this going is I'm eventually going to create my own bar. That's like a private bar, and have certain standards so that can go by, and then brand that bar and market it to say, there's organizations that's testing these kind of people. Like if you look at your electronics, there's a UL logo on most electronics, and that's I forgot the name of the companies, but they test all these electronics out to make sure it's good. Then they put their brand on there. So I mean, most people don't even know it exists, but that laboratory does all this kind of testing. They put their name on it, and so this kind of thing we got to do it on our own, not rely on government monopolies to make this decision, because inevitably, especially government coerced monopolies are the worst. They make because there's no controlling. They can do whatever they want to do, and they have the government's backing and the force of that. So Ron, I could keep going, but that's definitely stuff another time to have these discussions. One quick thing, I don't know if I mentioned it, but Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this. There's a segment of the proletariat or the people that will not adjust. They don't either have the ability to for various reasons, and these people are going to get lost as the crowd keeps moving faster forward. That is an issue. I don't want to sound harsh and be a Republican here saying this kind of stuff, but on a personal note, who listens to this is for lawyers to sharpen up. You got to fine tune that knife and go as far as you can. And what I'm doing is, I do somewhat pro bono work, and I put the information out to help people. Easy thing, when I go to restaurants, I try to tip a lot. Or when I see musicians, I'm a guitar player. If I see a musician at a farmer's market playing, I always give them money as sort of social security for them. The way we help these people is on an individual level, and putting our money where our mouth is, not by giving the government taxes, so they buy some bombs with it, and then some lobbyists pockets the rest, and they give you back 2% to give to the homeless or the poor. Really, it's just a direct engagement as a community. And the point of my podcast is I really want to have a hardcore immigration law community of us lawyers helping each other. Obamacare, I talked to some insurance people that they banned this, but immigration lawyers that are solo and small, we should have our own net for immigration, for insurance, for getting health insurance. We should have our own group. Because right now I'm a solo, I have to pay the craziest, highest rates. Why not get 1,000 solo immigration attorneys, or have AILA have its own insurance policy, health insurance, and have us lawyers, partner up and diffuse the risk that's associated with insurance, all that kind of stuff, instead of having to go to marketplace and have these astronomical rates. So there's ways on individual as we get together and fix this. There's usually some sort of legislation that prevents it, but we got to get rid of those, and maybe the California bar may be one of those things that's hurting the consumer. But I think neither of us have an exact position on this. So just talk openly about it. It's a controversial subject. Ron, if people want to get to know you or contact you or look you up, share with us your social media info and contact info.
Social media. Well, just old school email is probably great. Ron, R-O-N, at Matten-law, MATTEN-LAW.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Ron Matten. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, not so much.
And do people call you Matt by accident a lot too?
It does happen a lot. Did I tell you that before?
No, I actually called you Matt for a quick second. I was like, Matt, that was wrong.
Yeah, no, you're definitely not the first who's done that. And then Apple also likes to autocorrect my name to Rob, but that's not Rob. I'm Ron. So yeah, I questions about this, feel free to reach out to me. This video will definitely be shared on my LinkedIn as well, because I really hope it generates some interesting conversation. Like what you just said, it's not that I have a strong position one way or another, other than I think technology is going to happen. And so I think, if you're against the proposal, at least get on board with that concept that technology is happening.
Awesome. Thanks so much. There's all this stuff I want to talk with you about, but
yeah, let's do this again. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, good stuff, Ron. Thanks a lot for coming on the show.
All right.
Let's talk soon. Bye-bye.